Have you ever wondered about Quinlan? Did you think that he's good, bad, and different? He's showing up in the meta. I played him at a store showdown, and I decided to do a deck tech video to show you what you could possibly be running at your next PQ. So this is a deck I decided to start playing because I found it very interesting. I took it to a store showdown, won, and thought, hey, maybe this deck has legs. Maybe it's got something. And it's Quinlan, which is one of the cool characters. If you want to flash back and watch some of our early episodes, this is the one character JJ, my co-host, actually predicted would be in the meta and predicted would be a leader before we even knew what all the leaders were. So this was a very fun surprise, and I've actually had quite a bit of fun with this, even though I'm not typically a hero player and I'm not usually much of an aggro player. So let's get into the deck and talk a little bit about what the deck is, some of the turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plays are, strengths and weaknesses, and then we can also kind of talk about a varied version that I am working on that is something that I might be playing at the next PQ. So this is a Quinlan ECL deck. It has 2 shoot first, 3 bounty hunters query, 2 of the hotshot blasters, 3 of the battlefield marines, 2 Leias, 3 of the Gamorrean guards, 3 L337s, 3 surprise strikes, 1 spare the target, 2 Akbars, 3 falcons, and that's the baby falcon, 3 Sundari peacekeepers, 2 of the Cobb Vance, 3 spare the targets, 3 Huyangs, 3 General's Blades, 1 Bright Hope, 3 Kiras, 3 Aylas, and 2 Plo Koons. So this is essentially the shell of the deck that I had kind of found and started playing around with. Thought this was like a very fun deck to play, and kind of wanted to basically present it to y'all. So essentially, Quinlan likes to ping. So when he is on his non-unit side, he essentially will ping after, and it's an automatic ping, so you don't have to exhaust it as an action, but he essentially will ping any unit that costs the same as one you've played. So going first is not always the best if you want to use the Quinlan plays. Quinlan will ping in a game anywhere between 3 and 6 units, typically, depending on how long he stays out on his leader side. Because when he hits his leader side, he is able to ping any unit from the top down. So essentially, if you play a 3 cost and they have 2 costs on the board, you could ping one of the 2s. If you play a 5 cost, you can ping one of the 5 and downs. And so that's kind of how this works for it. If he's on his leader side. So initiative is not as important. It is only important if you think they're going to kill one of your units and you need to get it out. You don't always have to get his unique special ability off, but I tell you what, it really helps if you need to be able to take out like an early Greedo, or being able to take out, some other unit to be able to put 1 damage on it, and then you can swing in with a 2/2 that can just take care of it. So they could play a battlefield marine turn 1. You could play your L337, ping them for 1. The next turn you can swing into it, take care of it if that's what you would like to do. A lot of what this deck wants to do essentially is it wants to outvalue a little bit with being able to trade up for the lower health units and the lower attack units, and then it wants to just go to base and just say, I'm going to marinate and murder everything in my path. So our turn 1 play, one of the best plays for the opening play, especially against like a Tarkentown type deck, is L337. I will tell you, the best feeling is to be able to play an L337, have a Tarkentown deck, either a Quinlan or a Django or something, be able to ping that shield off, and then they spend their effort doing a daring raid, and they do a daring raid, and then they use their Tarkentown to kill your L337. So you just gave up 1 unit, but hey, I'll tell you what, it makes it so that they can't use it for the rest of the game, which is really important. But L337 is one of the best opening plays. You could also put Crafty Smuggler in your deck. I don't have that in my deck specifically right now, but that is something I've been contemplating as we go forward. Battlefield Marines and Gamorrean Guards are great alternative plays, especially against aggro. If you're not looking to take out their units or you're not worried about their Tarkentown, Battlefield Marine is an easy 3 damage to base. A Gamorrean Guard Retainer, especially if you have it, you can slap it down. They play a ground unit. You claim, you then play Battlefield Marine. You get to ping them, and now basically, as long as they don't have 4 health, or they don't have more than 4 health for that turn 1 play, you're good to go. They if they trade into your Gamorrean guard, it's basically almost a 4 damage upswing, which is really, really valuable in this deck. Your other backup plays is you can play a Bounty Hunter's Query. If you're not worried about them bouncing, if they are going to bounce their unit, you don't want to play that. But that's a good play to be able to play that turn 1 if you don't have anything else. Leia is okay. Leia can help you play that and then play a Bounty Hunter's Query. I have done that before where I've played a Leia, readied one of my resources, played Bounty Hunter's Query, and then essentially if they kill my Leia or whatever they want to do, I can just put other units onto the board to try to go after them the next turn. It's not the best play, but hey, it's a play that's out there, and it does give you kind of an alternative for your opening. Turn 2 plays is how you start to build your board. You're not looking for your surprise strike cards right now, and you're only looking for your spare the targets or like a clear field if they have a sentinel and you can't get around the sentinel. One of the great plays is Sindari Peacekeepers, especially against aggro. That allows you to build your board, allows you to get a restore, and it's a 5 health unit. Cobb Vanth essentially allows you to discard a card, and then you get to play it into play. The one thing to remember, though, if you're playing against like a Cad Tarkin Town or a Django that you know is going to dump that, and anything that has a Tarkin Town base, and they do that damage, you cannot claim and let them kill that unit. You just pass, and if they want to kill it, then you get to resurrect something from your graveyard with it. I have made that mistake more than one time and regretted it, but Cobb Vanth is such a good value, especially for this deck. We have a lot of 2-cost units that we're running, so the probability was pretty high. I think we're at over a 55 or 60% chance that we're going to hit at least one turn or 1 2-cost in that. And it's kind of like a Vader per se. It's not quite as good, but this is like a 3-cost Vader. You can ECL this in to take care of a Sentinel they have, take care of a unit you don't want to swing at you, if you really want to. And then you can also then take and you can pull up your and bring in another unit. So essentially, like Cobb Vanth can go in and then come back, and then you basically have that second unit that replaces him for free. Other tempo cards, depending on what you're kind of playing against, if you're not racing as much, but you are worried because they're going to you're going against somebody like a Ray who's playing a lower attack unit, but they're going to buff them up with experience. Hu Yang is a great. He is not good if you play a Gamorrean Retainer turn 1 and then enhance your Gamorrean Retainer, and then they kill your Gamorrean and get the Retainer before anything else can happen. But it does make that a 5/4, which is pretty good for a Sentinel. So if you do want to stop them from going straight to base, that's a really good play as well. Obviously, the Falcon comes in ready. I will forewarn you, the one issue with the Falcon is you have to pay that resource if you want to keep it on board. Depending on what you're playing against, if you're playing against another aggro deck, that Millennium Falcon can be great to kill their space units. If you're playing against something like a Bosk Blue, and they're able to take your other unit, you probably don't leave the Falcon down. You probably pick it up because you know you're going to lose it the next turn if you don't pick it up. So it's kind of a trade-off. You have to understand like where the math is going to land with it. A lot of times you don't have a 4-cost unit that you want to play. We don't run a lot of 4-cost units. We have pretty much none. And if you do want to use that ability, you can play that, and then you don't have to worry about it the next turn. You can still get that other 3 damage in. If you have a surprise strike, it's great to keep that Falcon up. The surprise strike it with your 4 resources, play another 2-cost unit, and then if you need to on your turn 4, you can pick that Falcon back up so you don't have to pay that resource if you need to be able to ECL something out. This deck likes to play a lot of units low to the ground. This deck loves to play against and just go to base. Like, this deck does not care as much about trading with your units unless for some reason they have a unit that's going to be really bad. And I'll give you an example. If they're running Bazine and you know they have McClunky, if they play a Bazine, they strip your hand, being able to McClunky that back, take care of your turn 1 unit, and then on top of that, be able to play Bazine in the same second turn is not a fun experience. I will tell you from firsthand experience, especially when you pull a Falcon, they strip your Falcon, you grab another one, you're like, yes, I'm going to play it. They McClunky. You don't put your Falcon down, then they play their unit, use their CAD baking trigger and McClunky again, and then next thing you just sad all around. So The big thing is just to understand who you're playing against and what you're playing against. And that's why Leia comes in. If you need the tempo and you want to tap down one of their units because they got 3 units out, somehow they have 3 units out or 2 units out because they're playing on one cost, Leia allows you to tap and put down a unit. It also allows you to play Leia and then play another 2 cost unit. And because we do have Smuggle in this deck, we don't always worry quite about having a bunch of units, like a bunch of hand. If you're going against somebody that you know is going to strip your hand with a pillage the next turn, Leia's great. You just play her down. You get to play a second unit. Basically, Leia is a 1 cost, and then you can play another 2 cost unit down, which is really good. Sundari Peacekeepers would not allow you to play the Leia, but the Sundari Peacekeepers get you the restore. But if you don't need restore, Leia's great because it just allows you to play 2 units out at a time. Next up, we have Akbar and Spare the Target. Akbar is if you have a board state and one side of the board and not both sides, Akbar allows you to do like out of hand damage. He is not the best, but he is definitely very good at controlling. Or if you want to collect that bounty, if you have a bounty hunter's quarry and you just didn't want to trade into any of the units, he's a great turn 3 play because you could play him for 3. You could play the bounty hunter's quarry if you haven't played it yet. You can, if you already have that out there, you could play Akbar down, and then you have that extra resource if you really needed it for something else. But it just allows you to be able to throw down, usually it's 3 damage. 4 if you have Leia the turn before and they haven't killed anything. So then it kind of gets you 3 to 4 damage on a hand. You also will be able to ping something. So sometimes like I have played against the Han Solo yellow where they play the liberated slaves down, right? Which is a 3/5. Well, they didn't kill any of my units. I've now got 3 units out because of Leia. I then played an Akbar, was able to ping that liberated slave because it's a 3-cost unit with a Quinlan, and then on top of that, just do the other 4 damage and just wipe their unit off the board. Yes, it does kind of stop you a little bit here with not being able to play another unit, but if you've already got 2 to 3 units out, Akbar then becomes a restore unit and kind of a big body unit that you are able to upgrade with either a hotshot blaster, which makes him a 3/4, or you can put a general's blade on, which he just gets crazy. He's now a 4/7 with a general's blade. So he avoids, with the general's blade, he actually avoids the takedown range, and he also avoids the fell the dragon range. It's great. It's a really kind of niche thing that you don't see a lot of. But sometimes you don't want to upgrade your Quinlan, which we'll get to in a minute. Sometimes you just upgrade your Akbar, and it's like, hey, Merry Christmas to you. Spare the Target's really good as well if you have a bounty out there because it allows you to collect that bounty. Your goal is to collect that bounty to get that extra unit out, because the probability that they could kill 3 or 4 units on your turn 3 unless they've ramped is very hard. They typically will not be able to do that. And what that does for you as a player is it allows you to be able to have your turn 4 where it gives you your ECL Ayla, it gives you your full health or your full attack platoon. And it just creates a board state that they don't have the ability to deal with. If you don't have a lot of units to play and you just need to go to the board aggro against aggro, this is really good. General's Blade is a great pump. Bounty Hunter's Quarry lets you get the other card out like we talked about. And Surprise Strike is just hands down one of the best cards in the whole game. Just being able to throw 3 damage in so that you can kill something if you need to kill something of theirs. If they play like a Kira, for example, and you're worried about not being able to play your Plo Koon or your Ayla next turn, you can Surprise Strike one of your units into that Kira and kill it. Last stop for turn 4 is Kira. Kira by hands is like the most fickle card. You either love playing Kira or you hate playing Kira. I like playing Kira later. This card is a little bit different. I do like it because it does stop their turn 4 play, and it is better against aggro decks than it is against control decks. But I will tell you, like, it stops an overwhelming barrage, especially if you have initiative and you throw her down. You can ping something if they have something with 4 costs out there. If they don't have something with 4 costs out there, you just forget the ping. You put her down. You call overwhelming barrage. Guess what they can't do? Wipe your board, which is very, very important. If they have a sentinel like Obi-Wan Kenobi, you can stop that. If you're playing against a Han 1 yellow deck, you can stop their DJ Tech BS combo right here with Kira. Kira, unfortunately, has to be main decked right now just because of the meta, and I think she's a good enough card that we probably keep her at least as a 2 of, even if the meta shifts where we don't need to restrict cards. But she's just so good being able to come out and say, hey, no more, you're not going to be able to play this card. And it's just such a good way to stop and create that dead churn for your opponent. Since we're not playing any ramp cards, we our leader will flip on turn 4 at the earliest. And so really I found with this deck it's not that big of a problem. Your goal obviously is to be able to ECL AL out. That's the best play you can have. Especially if they're flipping the same turn. And if they can't deal with your units, I'll tell you what, Quinlan comes out with 7 health. He's very hard to deal with. Ayla gets played. She will essentially, as long as they're not over curve, she comes out as a 5. She does pings 1 damage if needed to something else, and then she can ambush in with the ECL base as long as you have 2 units out. So Quinlan means you only have to have 1 other unit out. If you built your board against aggro and they haven't taken any of your units down, well, guess what? You now have the ability to just bring Ayla in, ambush her, and she lives. She stays around. I will tell you, do not be afraid of Ayla, losing Ayla this turn. Ayla is what I would consider a burn card against their leader. So essentially, when their leader flips, you're going to play her. You can do anything that's 5 costs. If your Quinlan's out, you could do anything that's 5 costs and down. So, for example, if they have a buffed up Sabine and you need Sabine to die, and let's say Sabine's got like 6 health left, you can ping Sabine if you want, and then do the Ayla. You could just do the Ayla, ping something else. There's lots of things you can do when your Quinlan's out. If Quinlan isn't out, then you have to be very conscious of that 6 attack. It has to be able to kill it. Otherwise, Ayla doesn't live. But I'll tell you what, if you ain't got the units and you need to kill something, just do it. For example, and I'll give you an example. I've had a Django flip, which usually what that means is Django flipping means he has something that he's going to play that's going to stop most of your board, or he wants to stop Quinlan from doing anything. Just ambush Ayla out. Just go ahead, use the ECL. She still technically lives with 2 health, and even if she didn't, who cares? Because she's going to be able to do the 7 damage to Django, take Django completely out. It does not work against CAD, unfortunately. But it does work against any 5 cost leader. And that's the most important thing, is because she can do, with Quinlan, she can do that 7 damage to any 5 cost leader and just take them off the board. So if they aren't paying attention, it's gone. Plo Koon can do the same thing without ECL. The difference is Plo Koon has to have the other 2 units out to be able to get the raid 3. That could be a little bit more difficult. Plo Koon is what I would call like your secondary target for turn 4 to help clear the board. Unless they've been taking out your units, then you can't play Plo Koon. He's just a very good unit though that does allow you. He stays on the board, but really Plo Koon can be played the next turn. So if I have an Ayla and a Plo Koon in hand, I almost always ECL out Ayla, and then I hold Plo Koon to the next turn. Even if I can't get Plo Koon's 6 damage off, I'm at least getting him onto the board for that. The other neat little trick is you can, if they're flipping and you don't have Ayla or Plo Koon and you have a Leia and let's say a General's Blade in hand, or you have a resourced, and I should throw this in there, but if you have a resourced Hotshot Blaster, you can dump Leia, and instead of readying a resource, if you don't want to, you just tap down something that could kill your Quinlan. So for example, they've had something where I've ECL'd Leia out, done the 2 damage to kill their unit, so then they can't Plo Koon my unit back. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is a nice little thing. Leia still allows you to play General's Blade or Hotshot Blaster. You could use the resource and then play Kira, or 2 more low-cost units if you have them. But really, Leia's big thing is being able to tap a unit so you can't kill Quinlan. Quinlan comes out, you play a General's Blade, then you can either murder something you want, or you could just swing into base. And I will tell you, a double General's Bladed Quinlan is a nightmare for an opponent to take down. And if they haven't ramped, they don't have their Rival's Fallout yet. And I will tell you what, being able to swing in for 9 damage is very, very, very important. Now you should be getting close to the end game. Either the fact that they have no units on board and you've done a bunch of damage to base, or you have a few units on board and your base damage is roughly even. Now's the time you got to close that game out. So you should be able to close the game out turn 5 or 6. Falcons are great. Even if you have a Falcon in play already, you spend the resource, keep it afloat, do your damage in. You can always overwrite that Falcon. It still costs you the same. You still got to cost you the 3, but it does come in ready. So like if they sentineled up that ground and you're very worried about, being able to finish off that base, you could throw a second Falcon out there, get rid of your first one, do your 3 damage, and then you can choose whether you keep it or not keep it. Um, a lot of times that's what I will do is I will overwrite that Falcon later in the game. If you need to and haven't used your ECL, here comes Ayla. Otherwise, Platoon Ambush is one of the best plays for turn 5 or turn 6 because it just stops whatever they have that can kill you and then allows the rest of your units to swing in. If they're running lower units, is going to give you the ability to do things that you aren't able to do otherwise, and that's kind of the key thing with Plo Koon is the fact that if they don't have the same amount of units on board as you do, or they don't have big enough units, you could just start stopping their unit and then just running to base with yours. So if you got 3 units out there, you could Plo Koon in something, stop them from being able to swing with their big thing, and then turn around and use all your other units to swing in. If they haven't killed your Ayla for whatever reason, Ayla is like either let's go to base damage or let's kill off something they have. If they had played a Poe and then ECL it out because they've already used their ECL and you've already got a Leia or an Ayla on board and you've got the coordinate, just swing in and kill it. If you think you can do good 10 damage to base, then just swing Ayla to base and let them kill Ayla if they really want to. Spare the target will just kind of help you clear their board for a turn if it's a sentinel. That's usually the big thing. Falcon is really good, like I had already said. And then you have the General's Blade and Hotshot Blaster. We're going to get to the sideboard in a minute because Han's your big unit that can come in. So right now we don't run him main board. You could run a main board, but we're not running the main board right now. But mainly you can use Han to come in and help close out the game as well if you really need to. Most of the time I found with this deck, you're running into not having to do that. So that kind of leads me to my sideboard. Currently, right now, we have 2 Hans on the sideboard, 1 Falcon, 2 Scannings, 1 Ewing, 1 Tech, and 3 Spark. And that's kind of how I've been running that deck. But yeah, essentially, Han's there to deal if you need to go a little bit bigger. You're playing kind of a mirror match. If you need something where they're going to trade with your units a lot more, just bring Han in. Landless Falcon's that other surprise ambush card that can work really well on turn 5 or turn 6. Scanning Officer is to say screw you to smuggle. You play against a Quinlan Tarkentown, side in, Scanning Officer, play it round 1 or round 2. Sometimes I don't play it round 1, and I just hold it in my hand, and as long as they don't spark me, usually I'm pretty good. And that's kind of a iffy play. That's up to you how you want to handle that. But I guess like I'll be honest, if they spark you and dump a Scanning Officer and you're able to play another 2 cost, you're probably not super sad. But again, against Han, it's great. It forces them to hold their smuggle cards. And, you know, especially because I'll sit there and if a Han yellow player is playing and they have initiative and they pass, I will claim and then I will play Scanning Officer that next turn. And if I don't get anything, I don't care as much at that point. I'm just now worried about putting units down. You can also use a Scanning Officer, like if they decide to ramp for that turn, you can always then play it to hopefully get something of theirs. The probability that they, out of all of their cards, they don't have at least 1, if not 2 resource cards is pretty big. Against a Cad Bane, this is great because you're just able to play it and get rid of their blasters. Cad Bane Green's a little bit more iffy. They don't play very many smuggle cards outside of Bazine and Blaster. But Scanning Officer is just, yep, I'm going to play this and I'm going to get rid of whatever your smuggle cards are. I don't care as much about killing that turn 1 play, though that's a benefit. I care more about being able to get rid of the Hotshot Blaster coming in later or that Bazine coming in later and sniping my hand. Spark of the Rebellion is great to add in as well. For mirror matches, it's great to be able to add in anytime you want to deal with their other units. Ewing Reinforcement is kind of just my, hey, it's my catch out. I need to go wide card. I would probably need to run 2 of them, and it might be a consideration to run 2 over the Tech. But again, the Tech is also kind of my in case crap happens card. Tech's here to say, hey, okay, I know that they're going to be killing my hand. I'm going to play Tech and smuggle him in later and then be able to play stuff, you know, protect him with my Sentinels and then be able to smuggle stuff in with him. I mean, you put a General's Blade on Tech, and he's now a 5/8, and that's pretty good too, even though you don't get the benefit of the reduced cost. You have the ability that you have a bigger unit. They have to then either kill Tech, and usually you can get a couple of smuggles off to get like a Han in, or get some sort of a, like, I've resourced Ewing Reinforcement round 1 because I had it and played Attack and then been able to pull it out of my graveyard because we went that late. That's my current sideboard right now. Probably something that could be changed depending on what the meta looks like. Now we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Weaknesses: any deck that can steal your resource to stop you from flipping is a big problem. Any deck that uses ramp very aggressively to go over top of you is going to be a problem. That's what the sparks are there for, to say, hey, nope, you grab their ramp and say, no, no ramp. You also grab overwhelming barrages and say, no overwhelming barrage for you. That's one of the big things. This is funny because you play this against like a Yoda deck, and like they're putting their card down. So sometimes they try to hide it so you can't spark their card. I found out that's like a thing with Yoda decks, but you will struggle against any deck that will be able to ramp over top of you. And if they ramp twice before your flip turn, you're probably gonna have a really hard time. But if they are ramping, they aren't taking your units off the board. Your best bet is to go wide then, and just play your 2-cost units from hand faster to be able to put more units down. We also don't like hand control. If you have a lot of hand control, if they have a lot of hand control, you do not like it, and it's not a fun game. I will tell you right now, for them to be able to snipe your Spark of the Rebellion, you don't care. But if they snipe your Ayla or your Plo or a General's Blade, it's not very fun. So Han 1 yellow is a big problem with that Bodhi. Being able to play Bodhi turn 1 or Spark turn 1 is really big against this deck. So those are kind of the things you got to think about and deal with your smuggle piece a little bit more. So if you have for example, if you're playing against that and you know that they've got a Bodhi coming, you can go ahead and resource something, and that's what the tech is there for, to help you bring it back. This deck is amazing as a tempo go wide deck. That's what this deck does. This deck wants to go to your base. This deck wants to slap you in the face. This deck is decent against tap down decks as well, because you're still an aggro deck. They could tap one of your units, but you don't have to worry about it because you got all the other units. And when they're playing tap units, they're not also always building their board. I will tell you, the Space Django deck that does some tapping is a little bit harder, but once you get Django off the board, or typically they're only running in space, you can aggro just as fast as they can. We have smuggle cards for endgame. We have smuggle cards that are just amazing to stop the hand stripping. We also have a few shielded units and a few sentinels that help stop damage on base early if you need to. Quinlan's out of hand damage is just amazing because it is not an action. And originally I was not super high on Quinlan until I started playing him. I really like him. He has the ability to get the extra damage, defeat enemies, especially with ECL. So let's talk a little bit about a game plan real quick. Against aggro, you're racing them. Your goal is to only take out certain units that you need to. So if they, for whatever reason, build up like a Sabine that's got a Sabine unit that has a bunch of experience tokens on, that's what Spare the Target's for. It's really good against them. Clear the Field is geared against most aggro decks as well. You're not looking to go kill that Sabine as much as you just say, hey, let me just bounce that back to hand. Go ahead and figure out how you're going to play it again and put extra resources on. And I'll tell you what, if they play a Wing Leader and they've still got 2 resources left and they put it on a Sabine or another unit, you just bounce that unit and that's fine. Let them play that 2-cost unit again. It's okay. You stop them from attacking your base and you got rid of the health and experience for it. It's a little harder against leaders that have it. There's a discussion about bringing in Bamboozled to help with that, and that's kind of a bubble card that might be something we put in the sideboard in the future. But against aggro, you're literally racing, and your goal is to only take care of the units you absolutely have to. So, for example, Lurking TIE Phantom. If they put one down and you put a Falcon out, kill it. It's fine. Don't worry about the 2 damage. Just kill the stupid Lurking TIE. Especially if you're going against like a Tarkin deck where they're just going to be ramping that thing up, you have to kill it. We do have the bounce, but you can't always rely on the bounce. So sometimes you got to kill things. But for the most part, aggro, just go to base against them and work on neutralizing their leader the best you can. Mid-range decks are a little bit harder. Mid-range blue decks are very hard because they can perilous position you quite a bit and kill some of your units. Your best bet against them is to be able to bounce their sentinels when they put them down the same turn and swing in and do micro damage, is what I would call it. And then this is when you bring in your bigger units for the end game to kind of go against them. Han 1 yell is a whole different thing. You have to kill DJ and tech. You play against a Han, If they put a stupid tech down, just kill it. It's fine. Kill the kill the tech. Or if you know that if they play that tech, the next turn they're going to be playing a DJ. That's usually what they do. Sometimes they bluff, but most of the time they're pretty serious. They're going to put this down. They're going to then claim so that way they can go to the next turn and dump a resource and bring out DJ, which is really disgusting. So it does mean you sometimes have to trade in with units, but that's kind of what you're doing. You're either going to bounce or you're going to trade into mid range, and then what you're going to do is go wide towards your 5 resource turn and just spam that board. Against control decks are a lot harder. Control decks have more tools. Bosk Blue is not as bad as it seems. A lot of them aren't running pillage now as much, so you don't have to worry about that. Iden is a menace just because she can play the Sentinels, but that's why you have to spare the targets in there. You save those spare the targets for Idens and for Boss who are going to play those Chilsons. And if Akira's playing a Chili, you're bouncing that thing. You don't want nothing to do with a 6 health Sentinel at all. You don't have enough space units to go wide. There is a conversation where we might talk about moving to some more space to help avoid that. But right now, with the way our ground is set up, is it works out very well for most people. Avoid cluttering up space with Sentinels because they're doing it with the ground, which then allows you to win late game with Falcons in space. So against control, your best bet, especially against like a villain control, is to have 2 units out. Against any double blue control, it's kind of the same thing. You want to have a few units out, and you don't buff your unit as much as you just go to bait. So Hewing is not worth much in this setting. You're not worried as much about the Ayla stuff, the ambush, all of that ECL type stuff. Your big thing is how do you get extra units on board and then creating spike damage. So that's where, like, if I got a Falcon down and I know they're going to power the dark side me, and I'll claim, and then I'll just use a surprise strike on my Falcon, even though I know I'm going to lose it, or I'll bounce that Falcon back to hand, one of the two. So that's kind of your overall game plan in a nutshell. All right, real quick before we go, if you're not excited about Quinlan, I hope you get excited now. Quinlan has been so much actual fun to play. Like just as a leader, he has been fun. I liked Cad in set 2 as a for fun leader. I love Jabba so much in set 2 as a for fun leader. Quinlan is kind of my set 3 fun leader that has legs. This deck has legs. This deck can go into a PQ with all the aggro going along. This is a very more unique style deck that is super fun to play in the aggro-ish meta, and this can eke out wins. People will not know how hard this deck hits. This deck specifically here is what I would call my sampler deck. This is kind of what I've been testing out. I've dropped down on my bounty hunters query down by 1. I found that sometimes people are just bouncing that. There's so much yellow, it's a lot harder to get it to stick than before. So I've kind of pulled one of those out. I've added a home 1 and a Lando's Falcon main deck, specifically because I feel that Lando's Falcon is just so good as being able to ambush in and take care of, some of the other units they have in space. If they have a something blocking your other Falcon, you just ambush that thing in. It's also really good to add another unit to the board on Quinlan's turn. Sometimes you just ambush it in, even if it goes into nothing, and it just sits there and it can be there. The turn after Quinlan comes out as another unit to allow you to have a big body on board. Home 1 has been a weird test. I'm not super sold on it yet, but Home 1 is kind of my in the side type boards. It can come out and just be super good to be able to recycle those heroes, like being able to play it and to bring a Leia back to tap something down. It is pretty good. Being able to bring an L337 back, being able to bring an Akbar back, there's a couple of things that you can do with it that I like, and so it's kind of been a testing point to see if this would be good. The other option would be to throw one Han in main board and just let Han be there as a main board unit. That's also a conversation that can happen later. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of info. Hopefully that's a great deck. Like I said, I took it to a Store Showdown, won a Store Showdown with it, got all my promo things for it. So it's a really fun deck. I've really enjoyed being able to run this deck. And I hope that you enjoy it too. If you haven't yet, click that subscribe button. Let me know what you think about this deck. If you like it, if you want some changes to it. Again, I did not create this specific deck. This is not a deck Tanner created, but this is a deck that Tanner tweaked and then took to a PK or took to a Store Showdown and won with it. I think you'll have some success, especially in Store Showdowns with this specific deck, because it can be a surprise. And if you want other people to know about it, go ahead, share it with your friends, and tell them to come join the syndicate. Thank you all. Have a good night, and we'll see you on the flippity flop.